everybody. Welcome back to Lunch with PB&J. Just wanted to remind you that this is part 2 on our talk through 1 Corinthians chapter 13. We went through the first half of it, but it went a little bit long, and so Joe and I decided to break it up into 2 parts. So if you haven't already listened to part 1 on our episode called What is Love, we need you to stop everything right now. Go back, listen to part 1 of that episode 2, it would be, on What is Love, and then you can come and listen to this episode. It's really important you do it because we're going to pick up right where we left off. We're halfway through chapter 13 in 1 Corinthians, and so after you've listened to part 1, I'm about to throw it over to myself and my lovely wife, Joy. We're going to pick up right where we left off. Welcome to Lunch with PB&J.
Yeah. That's good. I'll go back to that other one then. In between rude and not irritable is love does not demand its own way.
So it's not selfish.
It's not selfish. Yeah, I think in another translation I might say it that way. Love does not demand its own way. And I do think that some of these, like those 3, I think can go together.
Yeah.
Somewhat, because sometimes we get rude with people because they don't do things our way. Sometimes we get irritated with people because they don't do things our way. Mm-hmm. I've told this story before. I tell this story a lot when I'm doing pre-marriage counseling and talking to couples that maybe just don't think the same way. You've got one person. I always like to kind of get a feel for, is one organized, one not organized, just everybody that thinks a little bit differently, and love does not demand its own way. So, I've been accused of being somewhat organized. People make fun of me because when we move chairs in church, I have a tape measure out, and I know exactly the distances between chairs and how far
all thanks
they
to
all
our
go.
Old pastor Josh Hanna.
Yeah,
Thank you very
so
much.
he ingrained it in me that everything should be done with excellence for the glory of God. All right, but I've always been that way. Even before I was there, I was always that way. And so I do like things to be in a certain place in a certain way. You wouldn't know that from looking at my office right now, but I do like that. 5 kids has changed that in me a little bit. But one of the things early on in our marriage, because Joy is not necessarily as much that way as I am. And so one thing early on in our marriage was it made sense to me, that things should go back in the same place that they came from. So when you're putting away plates and bowls and things like that, they should just always go back in the same cupboard that they came out of, because then you know where they are. And if you have 2 different types of bowls, they shouldn't be stacked on each, intermingled with each other.
And I'm more of a spontaneous person.
I don't know if that would be spontaneity.
No, spontaneity. It could go here. It could go here.
Willy-nilly would be a better terminology for it. So anyway, I realized, and I'll be honest with you, it really did, I'd always been around, because my parents are kind of that way of everything has a place, okay? When we traveled and we had a trailer, we had sound and lighting equipment, everything fit a certain way. I always knew if a box was missing because there was literally a hole where that box should go. And somebody opened my trailer one time and goes, "Wow, you are your father's son," because my dad was that way as well.
It's really thanks to him then.
And so here's where I'm going with it is I had to make a decision early on in our marriage of how much I was going to fight this. Mm-hmm. Did it really matter to me? Did I love my organization more than I loved my wife? Right? Did I love my organization and everything having a place more than I loved peace in my home? And so there was a part of me that I could have gotten rude and irritable and demanded to have my own way, or I can step back and go, it's really not that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. Or if it is, just do it yourself. And so a lot of time she laughs because every once in a while I will take hours and I'll just go through and I'll rearrange the entire kitchen, knowing full well that my kids do the dishes and put things away and it never ends up in the right place. And so, but it makes me feel good to do it, but I'm not going to demand my own way. Right. So I think that's a simple thing. I know there's a lot of people that struggle in a lot more important areas than that. But I think there always has to be that discussion. Basically, what that could be summed up as, that could be twisted around to this as well. Love compromises. Mm-hmm. Love always compromises. Love does not demand its own way, but is willing to sit down and talk and discuss.
Look at the things that really don't matter.
Yeah.
That we argue over.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the things that just don't matter.
Love keeps no record of being wronged. Mm-hmm. Yowzers. That's a big one. Mm-hmm. That's a big one, all right? You may not even realize how big this one is, but this is one of those places where you need to stop. Let's just pause for a second. Maybe close your eyes if you need to. Think about a person that you're struggling to love.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself why.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you struggling to love that person? Does it have something to do with something that they've done to you?
Yeah.
And is your love towards other people based on the love of God? Mm-hmm. Or is it based on how people have shown love to you or not shown love to you? Is it based on you being wronged by a person, and so because they've wronged me, I can't love them, mm-hmm. or I'm going to treat them badly, or I'm going to cut them out of my life. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to talk to that person anymore. I'm going to cut them off. I'm going to cut them out. I'm going to have nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
I'm never going to forgive them. I'm never going to think the same way about them. I can never see them in any light other than what they have done wrong to me.
Right.
And so this idea, love keeps no record of being wronged, I think is probably a bigger one than
we would admit to.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way of saying that.
I also think, I really think about family units mm-hmm. when you say that. Now, I think this hits everybody, but it especially hits the family unit because sometimes we're quicker to forgive that coworker or that whoever, or the person we don't, maybe that acquaintance. But sometimes that whole we're harder on the people that are our family members, mm-hmm. and we're harder on, there's so many stories of just people not, how do you word it? Just years and years of unforgiveness and years of, they might be on their deathbed and they're still bringing up something that person did wrong to them,
Yeah.
But it makes me think of family units.
That's really a huge one, and that's really something, and that I would encourage you if that's happened to you, if you have somebody, because I've heard some incredibly horrific stories mm-hmm. of things that have been done to other people, and I am not belittling or trying to sweep away really bad things that have been done, but it's this idea again that in order for us to move forward mm-hmm. in life in general, we have to be able to release those things to God.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Some people will just say, you just got to let it go. I'm not saying let it go. I'm saying give it to God.
Mm-hmm. But don't you think you could say, insert forgiveness here?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because
if you're keeping a record of somebody's wrong that they've done to you, it basically means you haven't forgiven them.
Right.
Would
and that goes,
a true statement?
I think so, because that goes with because there are people that do that. People that'll say, oh, I've forgiven that person, but mm-hmm. I'm never going to forget what they've done to me. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to forget that. You're keeping a record of wrong. Mm-hmm. You're doing that.
Yeah.
And there's no justification for that. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not to say that all of a sudden you just wake up one day and you've forgotten everything that's happened to you. It's not that. But that's why I say there's a difference between letting go of something and just hoping that it just turns to dust and blows away in the air. There's a difference between letting go of something and giving something to God.
Right.
Because then it has a place.
Yeah.
If you just let something go, then I can go let something go out the door, and then every time I walk out the door, it's still just laying in the driveway, right? But when I give something to God, it's taken away. Mm-hmm. It's off of me. It's out of me, and I've given it to Him. And then if it starts to creep back in, if it starts to come in and affect me, continue mm-hmm. to affect me, I can keep going to God, going, hey, God, I've given this to you. Help me to not take it back. Mm-hmm. God, I want to give this to you.
I think about the wording of that, keeps no record of wrong. Mm-hmm. Why do we keep records of things? Literally, in just practically speaking, why don't we keep records? So we can refer back to them later.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is to me is, are you going to just the memory's going to be erased of whatever that person did? No. But are you keeping a record, like keeping it stored away in this filing cabinet that you have it all organized that, yes, when I need to, chew this person out, I'm going to pull out my record and I'm going to remind them of what they did and how they wronged me, and you're just keeping it filed away for your purposes of destroying that person.
That's like the disciples coming to Jesus and go, how many times do we have to forgive somebody? 7 times? Is that enough? Should we just forgive them 7 times? After 7 times I can punch him in the face? Or is it 70 times 7 times? Jesus goes 70 times 7, and it's like, oh, okay, so 490 times. I get it. No, Jesus' point to that was stop keeping track of it.
Yeah.
Stop keeping a record of how many times you've had to forgive somebody.
Yeah.
Love doesn't keep a record of that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. Could you imagine if God kept a record? And kind of, everything we do, everything we say is written down, but it's released.
It's wiped
He loves
clean
us through
by
all
the blood of Jesus.
And so love keeps no record of being wrong.
And just to kind of go into the topic of marriage, like this is a big one for marriage.
Yeah.
And so this, if you're struggling in your marriage and you're struggling in your relationship, maybe look at this one. Look at this and say, God, am I lacking in this area? And do I need an adjustment here? Is this a problem for me? And looking at that.
And I think too, because again, I understand that there are things that have been done that have been painful and hurtful and all those things, and so you keep. Some people would say, I have to remember what's been done so that it never happens again. And so I understand that there's a protection mode that kind of kicks in there. And so let me also say this, that if this has happened, like if you have things that have been done to you, not only do you give it to God, and if this is one, as Joy's just saying, like this is something you need to look at. So it needs to be something that you talk about. Maybe you talk about with that person that's wronged you, but also get help.
Yeah.
Like if it's not something that you feel like you can move past, and it's just something that this record in your head of what's been wrong, of being wronged, is just haunting you, then get help with that. Now, I believe that God can help us, but sometimes it helps to just talk it out with somebody, of going, I've got to get all of this off my chest, everything that's ever happened, everything that's ever been done.
And He uses other people to help us.
And God uses other people to do that, but you have to be, but at the core of that has to be this idea of, I'm willing to erase, to wipe the record clean.
Imagine our relationships. If we face each other with records clean. Imagine our relationships. What could be possible?
Does keep record no blah blah blah. Does not rejoice about injustice. Does not rejoice. Love does not rejoice about injustice. It doesn't want to see. It doesn't want to see evil win.
Right.
I guess I'm
because
trying
the
to think how
other
else to word that.
translation says, "Love does not delight in evil."
Oh, there you go.
But rejoices with the truth. Is that going to be a stopping point?
No.
Our screen just went
screen
black,
went
so I was like,
Yeah. Say
Love
that again.
does not rejoice in evil. But what? Sorry. What was it? Love does not rejoice in evil.
Oh, it probably goes into the next thing there.
But rejoices in the truth?
Yeah.
Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth is one translation.
Whereas this one is, does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices when truth wins out. So love doesn't want evil to win.
Right.
It doesn't want the bad guy to get away with it.
Right.
But rather love rejoices when the truth comes out. And so whether that truth, I think the way you got to look at that is even when the truth doesn't necessarily line up with the way you want things to go, you still, love says, I'm glad the truth came out. Like I'm glad the truth won out. I don't want there to be injustice. I'm glad.
Right.
So even if it's, you know what I mean? Like it's just, you always want truth to win. I don't know how else to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that some of us might read that and think, well, of course I don't want evil to win. But basically, anything that's not obedient to God, everything that's sin is evil.
Yeah.
So you could look at that in your own life and say, because you think, why do I have a hard problem? Why would I have a hard problem with that? Of course I don't want evil to win, but it's this thing. So that means that the evil in my life is going to be exposed. And I need to rejoice in in truth coming out instead of, you know what I mean by that? Like, we need to look at ourselves too.
Yeah, and I think too, you could look at this in terms of maybe some political issues in the world today, of things, a lot's going on in politics right now and around the world. And I think you could look at it even in terms of some of those things as well, where there is a real cloudy, murky agenda that's out there. Everywhere. And there are some people that are rejoicing over injustices. And I mentioned it earlier, so I'll mention it again because I think it's one that fits there, is we believe abortion is an injustice. It is killing the innocent, all right? And so, but there would be those that whenever there is a victory that is won in terms of freedom of choice, as it's called, then they rejoice. But that's an injustice.
Right.
And so love does not rejoice about injustice, but it does rejoice whenever truth wins out. What would be the truth in that situation is that that's a life.
And how do we know what's just and true? This. Not what I feel.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's another way to look at this is we've got to look at the world around us in general and what are the injustices in the world, and always understand that there's always going to be a lot of voices that tell you what is just and unjust. And that's why I say there's like this very murky, cloudy agenda that's out there on both sides of the spectrum of wherever you stand politically or culturally, whatever
your worldview
all right?
is.
Whatever your worldview is, there's an agenda that's there, okay? And so as Christians, this is why it's so important for us as Christians to know what the Bible says, to know that the love that we have, that we are to show, is from God, and God demonstrates his love for us through the word, through the life of Jesus. And so that's why we have to know what it says, because this is how we're going to know what is just and what is unjust.
Right.
All right? And so, the Bible talks about this. It talks about the sun rises on the just and the unjust. Like, we all live among each other here. It's happening all around us. And so we just have to make sure that our love is a love that comes from God, that love does not rejoice about injustice. All right? We've got to understand that even if it doesn't seem to go along with what we maybe believed at one time or thought like is a socially right thing or culturally right or however you want to say that, like, just that we don't lose sight of the fact of what love really looks like, and that truth has to win out.
Right.
And so that's what we have to rejoice in, because that's really demonstrating our love towards God, but also it reflects God's love towards humanity. So I hope that made sense. So I'm just winging that one. All right. Love never gives up. Woo. Some of y'all need to hear that one. All right. Love never gives up.
Never?
Love never gives up. Just wanted to make sure that's what it said.
Never.
The Greek word there means never.
Never.
I don't know. I didn't look it up. All right. But love never gives up. I just don't even know what else to say about that one. I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
But that's why I let that sink in.
That's one of those ones, though, that's like, yeah, but. You know what? You sit on that butt, all right? And just...
It sounds like something Southern Mama would say.
What? Sit on your butt?
Yeah, you sit on that
butt.
butt.
Smack that butt right out. All right. Love never gives up. Yeah, but Ben. Yeah, but Joy. Love never gives up. Sometimes you just have to read the Bible and put a period at the end of the sentence, okay?
Which, going back to the statement before, this is why God is love and we need him in order to have this love. Because we do give up, don't we? Like, we come to the end of our breaking points. We come to the I can't handle anymore. But love never gives up. The love that comes from God never gives up.
Yeah. Love never loses faith. So now we're into where we were last week. Love never loses faith. And what is faith? Faith is
the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen.
God, I don't know how I could ever love this person again.
Mm-hmm.
God, I don't know how I can erase the record of being wrong. God, I don't know how I can stop being irritable with everybody around me. God, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to not demand my own. I don't know how to go through life and not have things done my way. Like, it's got to be my way. It's just got to be my way, or I get anxious. I got to be in control. God, I got to be in control. Love never loses faith.
Mm-hmm.
And that faith, we talked about it last week, that faith has to be in what? Has to be in God.
Yeah.
All right? Listen, you can't love without God.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never, it says, so the next two are, love never loses faith and is always hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
All right? There's always hope. The worst place you can ever be is in a place, we talked about it last week, is in a place where you feel like I've lost
all
hope.
Right.
And when it comes to love, I've lost hope that I'll ever find love. I've lost hope that I'll ever be able to love somebody again. I feel like I'm hopeless in that.
Mm-hmm.
That hope and faith has to come back in, and it's all got to be tied together. I have it down in here somewhere else. I think it's towards the end. I was going to talk about it, but this idea that you see this stepping down of we can never lose hope, but in order to never lose hope, we have to never lose faith,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because faith is the substance. It's the confidence of what we hope for. So in order to have hope, you have to have faith.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to have faith, you have to understand love.
Mm-hmm.
And that love has to be driven. So hope has to be founded in faith, but our faith has to be founded in the love of God.
Right.
And so you start to see the tier of how this is supposed to work.
Right.
And the only way that it can work. And so it has to be there. And then it ends with love never fails.
Mm-hmm. It endures through every circumstance.
Endures through every circumstance.
Every circumstance?
Every circumstance.
I like those words. Never, every, because again, it takes out excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hammer those. I like to underline those words in my Bible because it takes out excuse.
It takes the question out of it of, well, is there an exception to this? No, because it's every.
Yeah.
Well, is there an exception to the time? Nope. It says never.
Right.
Right? And so it is this, it's love never fails. When you can begin to apply love to all of these situations, the love of God, understand, we can't repeat this enough, all right? This has to be the love of God.
Right.
The love of God, okay?
Yeah.
But if you can apply the love of God to all of these circumstances, all of these things, it will never fail. Mm-hmm. Now, if I tried to apply the love of Ben, guess what? There's going to be some failure in there. But if I can apply the love of God to all of these circumstances and all of these situations, then the love of God never fails.
Right.
The love of God is perfect.
Right.
It is everything. It is the all in all of everything. All right. And this goes to, and again, I have this somewhere else, but it goes to that. It says that God is love. 1 John 4:8. But anyone who does not love, does not know God, for God is love.
Right.
In other words, love is not something that God does.
It's who he is.
It is who he is. He is the essence
and
of
even
love.
just thinking, we've got to stop. I say this to myself. We've got to stop using the excuse, well, I'm not God. I can't do these things. And literally, when we were made into that new man, we put off the old man and we put on the new man. He's given us his spirit. And that's the powerful thing to me, is all these things we're reading about, we can have. We can have. And that's encouraging, because sometimes you just read it and you say, I can't because I'm not God. I can't because I'm not Jesus. I can't because I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And we've got to stop that and receive it, to start to receive it.
But again, it goes back to that where we started, is we were created in the image of God.
Yeah.
God is love.
Yeah.
So if we're created in the image of God, that means that we can love like God loves.
Right.
And that's what we're called to do. We are called to love like Jesus loved. We're called to love like God loved. And what's the number one qualifying factor in there is greater love has no man than he would lay down his life for another. What are the two greatest commands? Well, sum them up. Love God, love others.
Yeah.
It's always about others. And so if you ever wonder, am I operating in love? Just throw this kind of test out there of just, is this more about me or is this more about them? You know, do in order for me to love them more, Do they need to change? Am I expecting them to change, or do I need to change? You know, is there a way that I could change the way that I think, the way that I act, the way that I respond, the way that I am in this situation? Yeah. Is there anything in me that could change 1%? Yeah. All right? I'm not saying the other person doesn't have any responsibility, but you can only take care of you. And so God, it's not, God, would you please help them to love me the way that you love me? You can't pray that. But you can pray this. God, help me to love them the way that you love them.
And it makes me think about, if we had, it's the terminology of faith, but if we had faith like a mustard seed, it can move mountains. What if we had love like a mustard seed? What could it do? So the point is, it's powerful what God can use that, what he can do. When we talked about like the gifts, you know, if you have all these gifts, the tongues, the knowledge, the faith that could move mountains, all these things, and then it goes into talking about love. Love is patient, kind, and we listed those and we went through all those. It really brought out to me the idea of the simplicity of what God wants for us. So it's not to say like the gifts of the Holy Spirit are just not, you know, they're super important and they're going to be helpful and God wants us to have those. But sometimes we overcomplicate what God wants us. Like, God, what's your will for me? Yeah. And literally, like, if you're struggling, if you're asking God that, if you're like, God, what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to be doing? We look around the world and we're like, how do I help? You know, literally open this up, chapter 13, and just meditate on patience, kindness. I don't want to be jealous today. I don't want to be boastful. I don't want to be proud. Like, if we could literally soak in the simplicity of just loving people, like, to me, just coming back to love is powerful.
Powerful. Love.
He's going to sing another song.
All right. Let's keep going. So now we're going to come back to the context of the spiritual gifts again, okay? Because if you remember where we started, it was Paul was talking to them about, hey, stop fighting and being jealous of each other over who has what spiritual gift and which role and this and that. Instead, you need to focus in on the greatest thing that you can have is love, okay? So then he comes back, and we're in verse 8 now. It says, prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge, which would be, that is prophecy. All right, prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything in perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. So Paul's talking about, listen, this world we're living in is temporary, okay? And what he's really talking about here is these gifts. He says these gifts will become useless. Yeah. All right? Here's what we got to, and I've read, listen, this is one of those places where a lot of people read 1 Corinthians 13 up to about verse 7 and then stop. Like, I read this today, and I've read all of it, but I read this today, or the other day, and I thought, wow, like, they're going to become, he says they're useless. They're going to be useless. And now, listen, there's all kinds of arguments in churches about...
You're like, wait, God, aren't they important?
Yeah, and there's all kinds of arguments in churches. Like, churches, you know why the denomination exists is because partly denominations exist because there's disagreements over the gifts. Right. All right? There's disagreements over certain gifts, and denominations pop up, and they're like, well, those gifts aren't for today, and that gift's not this, and that gift, and what about this gift? Is that one? And we're arguing about things that are temporary, according to God's word. They're temporary, which means what? It means that they serve a purpose for now. They are important. Paul said they're important. Jesus gave gifts. He gave the fivefold ministry, and so these gifts are important, but they are important to the task that we have now. So when do they become useless? And I got reading this, and I thought, Well, they become useless when we're in heaven because, it talks about speaking in tongues. And so when it talks about speaking in tongues and having the tongues of men or
And
of angels, well, guess what? When we're in heaven, I'm pretty sure it's going to be one dialect. All right. We're all going to be able to talk to each other no matter where we're from, no matter where you lived on earth, and no matter if you were an angelic being or a human being, we're going to be able to talk to each other. So we'll no longer have a need for that.
Right. The gift of prophecy, the gift of interpreting.
Gift of interpreting, no longer need anymore. What
we'll
about
know.
the gift of healing? Oh, wait, there's no sickness or disease in heaven. We're not going to need the gift of healing anymore, And what about the gift of evangelism? Pretty sure everyone in heaven's going to be saved and know Jesus. So
the gift of knowledge to understand.
So the point is that the gifts are eventually going to become useless.
Right.
So stop fighting over temporary things and just focus in on what they're for right now.
Yeah.
And using them for what's right now. But again, understanding that they this is why they have to be motivated and driven by love, is because otherwise we lose sight of what they're really about. We don't see the whole picture. If we start focusing
like we're
so much,
elevating them more.
Yeah. Well, and that's it. So if we start focusing more on the gift than we do on the purpose of the gift, then what happens is we start operating out of the gift instead of operating out of love. The gift needs to be driven by love. He says, that it's verse 11, I'll start there. But when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. And I saw, part of that, I see that, and I think, part of that is we're only seeing, right now, we only see part of the picture.
Right.
And when we operate in ourselves, we only see part of the picture. And so it's difficult for us sometimes to love through a situation or to even use our gifts properly. Because sometimes, like, maybe you have the gift of help or the gift of serving, gift of giving, but you're like, well, that person's not deserving of my gift because they don't meet the criteria that I have in my head, when it's God's gift to you to use in love. And so maybe he wants to show love through a gift, through you, but you're like, oh, I can't do that. We see as listen, 5 kids, okay, I've been through this, is a kid will absolutely flip out because you try to take something away from them. And, I can think of times where, like at Christmas or birthdays, kid gets a gift, it's all wrapped up, and you know how they wrap things up nowadays, like it's like stapled and drilled and glued. And
he's talking to you, Gloria.
All right, listen, I wasn't actually Mom. Oh my goodness, just called my mom out. I'm talking about the actual packaging, not the wrapping, but the packaging is so hard. And if you try to take it away from the kid for even a second, because they're just like, oh my goodness, it's a pony and blah, 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 blah. And they're so excited. And I'm like, hey, let me have that and I'll take it out for you. And they will flip out and scream because they just want it so bad. They want that thing. And I'm like, it's going to be better if you let me take it out of the package for you. So use it the way it's supposed to be used. And I feel like when we try to use our gifts without love, it's kind of like that. We get so excited about the package, we can't even use it properly because we're not using it the way it was intended to be used. We're trying to use it in ourselves, right? In our own understanding. And so that child thing. And then he goes on and says, now we see things imperfectly, like a puzzling reflection in a mirror. And it's like I got this image of just looking at a dirty mirror and not being able to tell, is that on me? Is that dirt on me or is that on the mirror? Or I was telling Joy the other night, it was like the tail end of a hockey game, and I was tired. I wanted to go to bed, so I just turned the game on my phone, and I took it to the bed, and I set it beside me on my nightstand, and I'm like laying on my side. I'm trying to watch the game on my little phone screen, right? And I kept getting so lost in the game because there's a little speck of dirt on my screen that I kept thinking was the puck. And the camera's moving around, so it made it look like this piece of dirt was moving. And I'm like, why is the puck just sitting there? Shoot! Somebody get to the puck. And then I realized, oh, that's not the puck, it's dirt. And again, we can get confused when we focus so much, when we don't operate in love, when we don't see things clearly. We don't see what God sees. We're only seeing a part.
But this is why we can't make our own judgments based off what we see, because the Bible says we don't see completely.
Right. So when we try to go through life trying to love others through our own understanding, through our own emotion, through our own thoughts, it will be biased and it will fail.
Yeah.
It just will, all right? We have to pray, God, help me to love them like you do.
Right.
I tell people that all the time when they're just struggling with a person. I'm like, you have to get alone and you just have to start praying. God, help me to see them the way that you see them. Because God, I know you love them. I don't know why you love them. I don't see anything redeemable about them. But God, you love them. Your word says you love them.
Yeah.
So God, help me to see them the way that you see them. Because I only see part of this, and the part that I see, they're jerks.
Yeah.
I hate them. God, I can't love this person. But God, you do.
Yeah.
So show me the full picture. Help me to see them and love them the way that you can.
That's good.
All right? Did you want to ask that?
Yeah, I had asked him earlier just this question of like, so we know he's talking about spiritual gifts, and it's important to have, here's your spiritual gifts, but we know it's also important you have to use that gifting in love. And I was asking him earlier, like, have you ever seen somebody that had a spiritual gift, but they were not operating in love? And what's the damage done there? Like, we see that it's not valuable. Like, we see that it's meaningless, useless. That's what he just tells us here. You can do all these great things, but if it's not done in love, it's useless.
Yeah.
But could we even go a step further and see, like, I feel like I've seen it, and I was asking you, have you seen it where it actually causes damage? Like, people operating in giftings that they have, there's God-given giftings and abilities that they have, but they're not using them out of love.
Yeah. I think the simplest one is, and I've seen it, but I think the simplest one is definitely, the gift of leadership. And there's some people that are called to be leaders, or some people that are gifted to be pastors or shepherds. And so these are people that are in positions that identify with their gifting, but when it's not done in love, it very quickly becomes a dictatorship. And they will walk all over people, and they will abuse people. And I think this is even what you see sometimes in, you see it's big in the church, outside of the church. Because again, like, people use these giftings not necessarily just in the church. So you can you can have the gift of leadership and be the leader of a company.
Right.
You can have the gift of, I think, even the gift of pastoring, which is just really means
Caring
to be
for
a
people.
caretaker. And so you can have that and be in a secular job in the world somewhere, but still have that gifting, but you're caring for people. But all of these things put you in a place of authority. And we see this all the time where positions of authority get abused, and where people take advantage of people force them into situations and things like that. And I think that's done when you are operating your gifting, but outside of the love of God. And so you're using it to abuse people, and you're using it to manipulate people.
And we see that in leadership, but you had even said too, like, you even see it in, maybe you have the gift of helps.
Yeah.
But you want to help so bad that you actually run people over when you need to be more patient with them,
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot of areas that you see it. So anytime that it begins to take, you could I think there's a ton of examples that we can give here. You could probably go through every single gift of the Spirit and find a way that you misuse that.
Right.
And usually it's going to come back around to you're not operating out of the love of God in that gifting. And so when you're not, and that's the thing is, again, it just circles back around to when you try to walk through this life without the love of God, you can be the greatest person in the world, but eventually it's going to fail.
Yeah.
You're eventually going to hurt somebody, and it's just not. It's just you're going to struggle in one of these areas of being rude, irritable, demanding your own way. You're going to lose patience. You're not going to be kind. You're going to get boastful or proud, and all of these things. So, because I think that's another one of those areas where you can have the gift of giving, but if it becomes all about you and look what I gave,
it becomes
then
pride.
It becomes prideful. And yet I know some people that are amazing givers, and like their number one thing is, we used to have a guy in our old church that we referred to as Donor X, and it was because he would just walk in and he would give rather large donations for most people, large donations to the church, and he would say, I feel like this needs to go to this area of ministry or whatever. But it would always, we laughed because it was like he would bring it in cash in a brown paper bag, like thousands of dollars, and he wanted it listed under donor X because he just didn't want
But
anybody
he's
to know that he was
doing
giving
that
that.
as a safety net to himself.
Yeah.
So that he
It
was,
didn't-
I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter whether people know you're not,
Yeah.
but it's a safety net to yourself. Your motivation is love.
There's 2 or 3
My
of us.
motivation
Yeah,
is not that people know me. My motivation is love.
exactly. Yeah.
You said this earlier, and I wrote it down, and I thought it was powerful, so I wanted to say it. But you made the statement, without love, our gifts become task-oriented instead of people-oriented. And I think that's so true because, like what we're saying, is you can have giftings, amazing giftings, but what you find with people is it just becomes a task in front of them.
Yeah.
It's not driven for people, driven for love.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up with this last verse here, and we'll finish off. Last verse, verse 13. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. What do you think of that?
The greatest of these is love?
Yeah.
I think that's a true statement.
Sum it up for us.
Oh, gosh.
I thought you were like, oh, I love this last verse. I want to talk about this.
I don't know what I was going to say, although
Okay.
I did. It really hit home to me. I think it's verse 8, and then that fits with verse 13. But love will last forever. And then here at the end, they're saying these 3 things: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. He's saying this is what's going to last forever. This is what's going to endure forever. And again, it's like these other things that we have, the spiritual gifts and the not leadership, but the spiritual gifts and the things that we can have are there to help each other and encourage each other. But again, coming back to that, what drives you? It has to be something that is eternal that drives you, not something that's temporary that drives you. So I just thought that really stood out to me and was beautiful. The fact that love is going to last forever. And so every single day, whatever I'm doing, if it's done out of love, and we've gotten a real clear explanation of what love looks like, but that's that powerful thing to me. If I want my life and what I do to last forever. Like it would break my heart to think that my life, I know my life is like fleeting in the sense of it's like a vapor. It's here 1 minute and gone the next. We know it's short, but it's this thing of it has the potential to last forever what we do. So we can either focus on the temporal things or we can focus on the eternal things. And that stood out to me, that love is going to last forever.
Yeah. No, I used all my ending stuff already.
He's done.
I'm done. No, I think kind of my last thought on it is just this: is love is forever. Love is forever, because God is forever.
Yeah.
And again, we come back around to this idea that this has to be grounded in the love of God. So it says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. The world was created out of love. God desired to have a creation that he loved and that loved him in return, and that they could be together in unity. When man sinned and broke that relationship, it was the love of God that led him to create the 10 Commandments so that there would be a way for them to be in relationship again.
Right.
And then it was love that caused God, because for God so what? Loved the world.
Right.
He sent his only son. So he sent Jesus. It was love that sent Jesus into the world. It was love that put Jesus on the cross. It was love that rose Jesus from the grave. It was love that sent Jesus to heaven to prepare a home for us so that we could all be together again, and we wouldn't need the gifts anymore because we would just be there in the essence and surrounded by the love of God in this home that was built on the love of God for us. And so love is never ending. It's never failing. It's eternal. And it's because it's the love of God, and God is eternal. Therefore, God is love. He is love. And that's why love lasts forever, because it is of God. Anything that is love is of him. And I think just in that verse I read earlier from 1 John 4, it says, if you don't love, then you don't know God.
Right.
And so I think that's a challenging, if I can leave you this kind of a heavy way to end it, but like if you're struggling to love people in your life, you have to really give yourself pause there. It's one of those areas where you really got to stop and go, does that really say what it says right there? And so you got to really pause and go, okay, I refuse to love this person in my life. what does that say about my relationship with God?
Mm-hmm.
Because that verse says that if I don't love,
Yeah.
I don't know God. I don't know God.
Yeah.
Because God is love. And so if you don't know how to love a person, then you need to get to know God, because God can show you how to love that person. So
That's good.
I'll end it there. Guys,
Happy
thank
Valentine's
you so much.
Day.
Hey, Joy,
What?
I love you.
I love you.
All right. And we love you guys. All right. Hey, do us a favor. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the little bell at the top there so you can get a notification. We are posting every Wednesday. It's been a really long episode, so we've probably broken it up over 2 episodes. So you get a little bonus episode, little 2-course meal here for lunch, okay? But yeah, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. Hit the notification bell there so you'll know when the new episodes pop up every Wednesday. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram if they let me back on. If there's something that you'd like for us to talk about, make a comment, all right? Comment on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or email us lunchwithpbandj@gmail.com. We'd love to know what you'd like to hear us talk about. That's it, guys. Thanks for joining us for lunch. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Bye.